Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how you can do a lookup when you've got multiple criteria you're looking for. So in this example I've got salesperson, product, store, and total sales in a pivot table. Now this example will work whether it's a pivot table or not, but I'm just going to show you how you can create a dynamic function that can do this type of a lookup for you. So let's say I want to pull the value for where rep A, product A, and store A is a match, which is just the first entry here. Now you could do something like just the sum ifs function where you select, okay, this is the sum range. I'm going to select this column, criteria is rep A, select the product column and the product, store column and the store, and that gives me the sum ifs. So if you just need the sum, or if you're pulling a value, then sum ifs works. But I'm going to show you a different approach if maybe sum ifs isn't available on your version of Excel, or if you're not wanting to do a summation, maybe you just want to pull a value. This will work in either way. So I'm going to use the index function. So if you've done lookups, you know, index and match can sometimes be a better way of doing a lookup as opposed to the VLOOKUP, which has its limitations. So in this example, I'm going to use index, and the index has three arguments: array, row number, and column number. So the array, I could select this entire pivot table, but because I know I want to pull from column D, I'm just going to select that as my entire array. For the row number, this is where it gets a bit tricky, because this is where I have to put in all three of my criteria in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the max function, which is going to force a calculation here. I'll show you how this works in a little bit. So I put a double open parentheses here because I want to encapsulate all these conditions within the max function. So the first up is the sales rep field, and I want to look where column A is equal to rep A, close parentheses, multiply, and then open parentheses, and now I'm going to pull column B where it's equal to product A, close parentheses, multiply again, open again, and pull column C where it's equal to store A. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to do one more here, multiplication, and now I'm going to pull the row number, and it really doesn't matter which column I'm pulling here. I'm just going to pull column A. I'm going to close this, make sure I've closed all my parentheses. There we go. And now I'm going to get to the last argument. And here I just set it to 1 because in my array here at the beginning, I only selected one column. So I'm only pulling from that column. So I can't put any other number. So I could have had multiple columns in here, but because I know which column I want the results to come from, I can just specify to D and just set the argument to 1. And so now when I close this, you'll see it gives me 545. So if this was a value or a number, it wouldn't matter. It would still give me that. Now if I were to change this to store B, it updates to $50. So it is working correctly. And now I'm going to show you how, well, before I show you that, the one thing I will say is when you're dealing with a function like this, or a formula like this that pulls an entire column, it could potentially slow down your computer, just because it's evaluating every single cell here to see that it meets all these criteria. So what you may want to do is limit the range if you know how big it's going to be. So in this example, I'm just going to set it 1 to 10 because I also want to show you how this formula is working. So I'm just going to make sure that everything is going only to the first 10 cells. Now, one thing to note, if this isn't calculating properly for you, if you've got an older version of Excel, you may have to do Control-Shift-Enter, so it calculates as an array. In my example, it makes no difference whether I do it or not, but if it's not calculating correctly, do Control-Shift-Enter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to the Formula tab. There's a button for Evaluate Formula. And I'm going to show you how this formula works. So first up, it's looking at A1 to A10 to see if it equals F3, which is rep A. So I hit the Evaluate button, and it's going to show me all the values in A1 to A10, as well as what it's comparing to. And now it's going to return a series of true or false values based on whether the criteria was a match. Now it's going to do the same thing for B1 to B10 to see if the product is product A. And again, true, false. And when you've got true, false values multiplying against one another, Excel, that's the same as a series of ones and zeros. So if it's false, then it's the same as a 0. If it's true, it's a 1. And so now when they multiply, you'll notice the first 3 values, the first 3 rows right here up until row 3 are all zeros, and that's because there was no match here. Now you'll notice after that everything was a match except for the last row, row 10. So if we go to row 10, we had rep A, that was a match, but if we go to product, it was product B instead of product A. So what this would have been is a true value multiplied by a false value, 1 times 0, which would have returned 0. These ones all above would have been 1 times 1, and that's why these are all 1s. Now it's going to do the same thing for column C, and column C, there's only one instance of store B, so there's only going to be one value that meets that criteria. And so that's where you see this fifth item here is equal to a 1, because that's the only row where all the criteria was met. And now the last piece of this calculation is I'm just pulling the row number. So I'm multiplying all these by the row number. And how it's going to work is, see, it's going to be row 1 times 0, which is going to be 0. So the only row that it's going to extract that's not going to be a 0 is going to be row 5 when it goes 5 times 1. And that's the beauty of this. Now when I pull the max function, it's going to pull the largest number, and obviously it's only going to pull the ones that had matches. So anything greater than 0, right? So this fifth row is going to be my result. So now when I look at the index function, what it's doing is it's looking at D1 to D10, which is right here. It's pulling the fifth row, which is going to be right here, and the first column, because it's only one column. And so that's why it's going to correctly give me this position, this point of intersect on here. And that's how that works. So whether you're doing a summation, whether you just need to pull a value, you can do a formula like this. So the key thing is you want to make sure you've got all your criteria in there, and you also want to include the row number, because that's very important. Otherwise, it's not going to know what row to pull from, and that's crucial in an index calculation. So that's in a nutshell how you would do a lookup when you're doing when you're looking at multiple criteria. Again, you could do something like the SUMIFs function if you're on a newer version of Excel and you just want the total, and there's not obviously any duplicate matches. I mean, in this case, it would pull the maximum, the largest row number that was a match. But if you've only got one value that's gonna be a match for all these criteria, then it's not gonna matter if you do a SUMIFs or if you did this. But if you're looking for a lookup that's gonna work, whether it's numbers or text or whatever else, then using index is going to be really helpful. The one thing to watch out for, though, is to make sure that you're not selecting the entire column or doing a huge range, because then it could potentially slow down your computer a little bit. Anyway, that's about it, and thanks for watching.